Hausensberger,
Here.
Andy Bailey,
Here.
Stacy Pettigrew,
Here.
Chester Bankus,
Here.
Grant Muller,
Here.
and staff Liz Stitzel and Kat Ballin present, as well as attorney Jay Moore.
Okay. And everybody get through the minutes. Do we have a motion?
I move to approve the minutes as presented.
Second.
Okay, we'll do a roll call vote on that, please.
Andy, and the second was
Chester.
Chester, yes.
Scott Hausensberger.
Yes. Actually, should I even vote? I wasn't here the last time, so.
There's nothing that says you can't
Yeah.
vote, but it's
Then yes.
you. Andy Bailey,
Yes.
Stacy Pettigrew,
Yes.
Chester Bankus.
Yep.
Grant Muller.
Yes.
And I'll pass these down for Stacy to sign.
You got one. Okay.
All right, so I guess we can go ahead and move into the hearings. We want to go ahead and proceed in the order of the agenda. We good with that?
Yes.
Okay. Why don't we start with docket 2722 SE, please?
Yes, so this is the petition of Daniel Rose, located at 100 North Railroad Street in Colfax. It's a request for a special exception for an accessory apartment in an accessory structure. The property in question is zoned medium-density residential, and the land to the east and the south is also medium-density residential. To the north and the west is agribusiness, and this is just kind of a block off the main drag as you go through Colfax. The site consists of 5 residential lots that are used in combination, and what appears to be the former right-of-way from the railroad that's been vacated and is noted in the legal description as being part of the 5 lots in section 8 inside the town of Colfax. The petitioner has a house on the site, and they're proposing to place an accessory apartment in an accessory structure to provide living space for the father of the petitioner to reside in. In order to have both the house and the accessory apartment on what we would view as a single building lot, in this case a combination of parcels, a special exception approval is needed. This petition site is the only dwelling in the block that it's located within, and it's adjacent to the agribusiness district. On the second page, you'll see a picture kind of this property. The gravel lot you see, that's the agribusiness district, so it's why it looks more intense than residential. And this is the first house into the residential. And then you can see on the flyover, there's a spot where the accessory building for the accessory apartment is planned to go. They're kind of in the back behind the existing outbuilding. There's a series of findings that need to be met in order to grant a special exception. And the first is that the proposed use conforms to the district provisions in which it will be located and the general regulations of the ordinance. And accessory apartments are a special exception in the R3 district. There are 8 supplemental development standards for accessory apartments that are in section 502 of the Unified Development Ordinance. You can only have one of them, that's met, that needs to be secondary and incidental, also clearly is. That it needs to be in a detached structure, if it's, or attached and within the principal dwelling unit, in this case it's detached, and needs to be on a permanent foundation. The owner needs to reside in one or the other, in this case he resides in the principal dwelling unit. There cannot be any exterior stairways. This will be a one-story, apartment, does not need one. And then the 06 is not applicable in terms of interior access, since it's an accessory structure. And then it does need to meet all county building codes and health department standards. So the applicant does understand they will need to meet residential code. I will come back to this later in the staff report. There has been some discussion, thus far, I'm not sure the applicant is willing to commit to a permanent foundation, so that may play into where we end up back around at the end. The town of Colfax themselves has no objection to the additional apartment, and it will share a sewer tap with the primary structure. We'll just move off of that to serve it. And finally, whether or not there's additional parking, and there's plenty of space on these lots, so that's not a concern at all. Next, the proposed use shall not involve an element or cause a condition that may be dangerous, injurious, or noxious to another property or persons, and shall comply with the performance standards herein. So the town clerk has no issue with the added unit on the sewer system. There's no other issues that were identified the petition would appear to create. And the town did not make us aware of anyone who came to the town board meeting in objection, for any reason either. 3, the proposed use shall be sited, oriented, and landscaped so that the relationship of its buildings and grounds to adjacent buildings and properties do not impair health, safety, or comfort, nor adversely affect values of adjacent properties. So this is an attractively maintained property, should complement other homes in the vicinity. The new structure will be smaller and have a more modern facade. It's also kind of toward the agribusiness side and in the back, so it's not gonna be super visible to houses across the street either. 4, the proposed use will produce a total environmental effect consistent with and not harmful to the environment of the neighborhood. Again, this is an accessory structure. It's gonna, the new accessory apartment is gonna have the appearance of a storage type structure, and there's a lot of those, one next to it, and other residential properties also have garages and outbuildings. 5, that the proposed use organizes vehicular access and parking to minimize traffic movement conflicts on adjacent streets. No concerns here, there's plenty of space for parking, and one accessory apartment isn't gonna generate a whole lot of extra cars. And finally, the proposed use shall promote the objectives of the ordinance and be consistent with the comprehensive plan. So the 2012 Comprehensive Plan Land Use Goal 2 says to promote the development of residential areas with high-quality housing in a variety of types, styles, and densities. So the use of accessory apartments subject to board approval does support this goal. And as a planner, I think it's also in line with agricultural preservation, because where you're not taking up new ground and you're using the ground that's already being used to maximum benefit, that's a positive. So in terms of recommendation, at the time of writing the staff report, staff recommended to approve the special exception request with a condition, which is true anyway, but just to make it very clear, that the accessory apartment in the accessory structure must remain in common ownership with the primary dwelling and all the lots that are used together now. It can't be later divided off into its own home, as it will not meet the standards for a house, due to both size and, location, it's accessory. So the additional thing that has come to light in more conversations since the staff report was written is, when Kat, who wrote the staff report, and met with it initially, she let them know that it needed to be on a permanent foundation. She put that in the staff report. They've since called and kind of talked to all 3 of us in turn, and it's been a point of discussion where there doesn't seem to be agreement. The reason this is a big issue to staff is we did have one years ago when we first started approving these. There was a shed that was being brought in and being converted to residential, and there was resistance to the permanent foundation. It is a requirement in building code for anything that somebody lives in. It does not matter what size it is or what shape it is. It has to have a permanent foundation. Our board approved it subject to them putting in the permanent foundation. We spent the next 7 years fighting with it, ultimately removed the entire structure. No one lives there now, but it put all the burden on our building inspector on that foundation. So staff's recommendation would be that if they're not very clear on the fact that they have to put in the permanent foundation and they're not willing to do it, that we deny the request for the special exception, because all we're doing is creating a known violation for our staff to fight with. And there's no way around, that's residential code, and even though it's small, it is a residential structure. So I know Ty, I think, was the last one to talk to them, and he said the same thing. They want to put it on gravel on runners, and that absolutely will not work for an apartment of any size. So I think that's the only thing that's come to light that has led to some concern. If it will be on a permanent foundation, then staff would certainly support it. If not, then I think it needs to wait and reapply when they're willing or ready to put it on a permanent foundation and find another solution with a habitable space for someone to live in meanwhile.
Is the applicant here?
Accessory structures.
You have anything you'd like to add?
No, I'm gonna lie, or go with what they say, because I need to build it, so get it built, put in there.
Okay. Okay.
I'll put it on a foundation,
So you're saying you will put it on a permanent foundation?
yeah.
Okay. Board discussion?
Is there anybody objecting to it?
I didn't ask, but do we have any objections out there? Cal?
Yeah, I guess if we're going board discussion, I agree, we need to put it on a permanent foundation, Mike. What we did one about a year ago for another apartment is a little bit different situation, but they did put it on a permanent foundation. I'm assuming that what you're looking to build is gonna be similar to that type of a
I
structure.
mean, everything, not just that one recently, but we've had others too. And not just accessory apartments, pole barn houses also have to have permanent foundations if they're gonna be
But-
occupied. You can't just build them pole barn
You
style.
just can't put a pole barn up and not
move
put
into
the,
it
yeah.
with, you know,
Yep.
with gaps in between. I mean, it's tied to residential code to the use, so.
Yep, yep. So, I mean, a block foundation's gonna work. That'd probably be the least expensive way to do it, Mike.
I mean, I guess we really don't have to have a lot of discussion about that, right? They have to meet the code.
That is
Yeah.
absolutely correct. Our concern was if you weren't willing to meet the code, we don't wanna create a impression that that's okay, you know?
Yeah.
and
Right.
We need to all be on one page from the get-go, so when you get to building it, it goes smoothly and there's no issue, and you dig your
I mean,
footer and get your inspections.
There's runners underneath it, but it'll be inside the foundation, you won't see it anyways. That's how they got it.
So, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you'll have to talk to Ty about how it's attached to the foundation, but yeah, even in a house, you have,
Yeah.
floor joists, that go across and help support it.
Yep.
Okay.
So do we need to, in our motion, would we need to put that the accessory structure isn't to be, split off in our motion to make that
I
clear?
would appreciate
you-
it being
okay.
included, and also the permanent foundation, just so it's all very
So
clear.
both.
And if for some reason it
Okay.
doesn't happen, then we would have to go the same direction as we did with the last one. And
Sure.
we would, when we ended up in court, we'd be able to say, no, there was no misunderstanding here, everybody knew what they needed to do.
Okay.
No other discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
I'm almost ready.
They take away our little cheat sheet on,
No, they didn't. Okay, I'm ready. I move to approve docket 2722 SC, special exception request with the conditions that the accessory apartment and the accessory structure must remain in common ownership with the primary dwelling and all the lots that are used together now, and also that the structure be put on permanent foundation. Is that good, Liz?
And are the findings in the staff report incorporated by?
Yes, and the findings. Yeah, I don't have my cheat sheet, so I forgot that part.
Sorry.
I'll second the motion.
Maybe just a moment to catch up writing.
I'm gonna move this stuff along as fast as we can.
Okay. Scott Hudson-Sperger,
Yes.
Andy Bailey,
Yes.
Stacy Pettico,
Yes.
Chester Vegas,
Yes.
Grant Muller.
Yes.
Right, so you're approved. So you're at a point now where you can put plans together, and I know you've been working with TAP, and reach out to us with plans. You can move into your permitting phase and get started.
All right, so
Thanks, Mike. Yep.
let's move to docket 2822 SE, and if you take us through the staff report, please.
This is the application of William and Brandy Siebert. Current address is 1151 Dolson Street in Frankfurt, but this site is actually out in the county. And this is a request for a special exception for a single residence in the agricultural zoning district. Both this parcel and all the surrounding land are zoned agriculturally. The petition site is a 10.1 108, so roughly 10 acre, a lot on the east side of North County Road 800 East. It's between 430 North and 500 North in section 18 of Forest Township. It was split off of a 66.252 acre parent tract. There's a large portion of wetlands on the site, but there is still sufficient space to build in the northwest corner on the site. The petitioners have made initial contact with the Corps of Engineers, and I actually think we might have an update to that, but, to request that a wetland study be done to be certain on the full extent and location of the wetlands. Staff scored the lot under the point system, but it only received 6 points and could not be administratively approved. On the second page, you can see the wetland that encompasses much of that woodland. And then there's a picture just from the road showing what that site looks like. And another one on the next page from the northwest corner. So the applicants are seeking approval for a single dwelling. There's 4 criteria in section 513.03 of the Unified Development Ordinance that the board shall affirmatively find are met. First, that the lot shall be located such that the proximity to other dwellings, the configuration of the parent tract, or the location of creeks, ditches, and other natural features have the least negative impact on the use of agricultural equipment or the use of the property as part of a farm. So this roughly 10-acre site that was part of the 66-acre parent tract is a wooded area that's mostly wetland. The petitioners would like to build a new home. Since the site is all woodland and the majority is wetland, there shouldn't be a negative impact on the ability to farm it. Farmers wouldn't be able to clear this even as it is because of the wetland that's within it. It would be protected. So 2, locating a dwelling on the new lot would not require changes in road surfaces or bridges. So this is on a gravel unpaved road that serves farm equipment to access several sites in the vicinity. Does not appear a dwelling would significantly affect traffic flow and volume. 3, locating a dwelling on the new lot would not interfere with current agricultural practices in the adjacent area, nor substantially restrict the expansion of confined feeding and other agricultural practices. So again, given that this site itself is woodland with the majority wetland, is not practical for farming, there doesn't seem to be a direct effect in agriculture. There's also no confined feeding operations within a mile that a new dwelling would have any effect on. And there are already 2 other dwellings less than a half mile from the petition site that have some restricting effect on what can happen in that area. 4, that there are mitigating circumstances in the application of the above rating criteria. The primary mitigating circumstance is that this would be a home site for the petitioners to reside in, and it's all woodland, majority wetland. So this is not high value for tillable acreage. I would also note that you generally want to locate a confinement facility or other intense agricultural practice in a wetland area. So as long as the wetland is not being disturbed, the addition of a home would add value to an otherwise lower value parcel in an agricultural area. In addition to these standards, there's the standard 6 special exception standards that are in section 203.11A. First, that the proposed use conforms to the district provisions in which it will be located in the general regulations of the ordinance. So if a special exception is granted, a single-family home would be permitted on the property. It will be subject to minor subdivision approval from the Area Plan Commission. 2, the proposed use shall not involve an element or cause a condition that may be dangerous, injurious, or noxious to any other property or persons, and it shall comply with the performance standards herein. So, as of, this is the thing I think we have an update on, but when Kat wrote this, there was not yet a determination from the health department on septic suitability, but they had completed soil tests, and we expected to have a health department report before the hearing. I'll come back around to that. I think Kat has some updates on some of these. 3, the proposed use shall be sited oriented in the landscapes so the relationship of its buildings and grounds to adjacent buildings and properties do not impair health, safety, or comfort, nor adversely affect values of adjacent properties. So this site is surrounded by farmland. There's 2 other dwellings, one north and one south, less than a half mile away. The new dwelling will be back within the woodlands, and anything that's wetland will not be disturbed. So most of those woods will remain on the property and intact. Since the site will remain mostly wooded, property values should not be adversely affected. In fact, it would seem they might even be increased by virtue of that ground being used. 4, the proposed use shall produce a total environmental effect consistent with and unharmful to the environment of the neighborhood. So though this is surrounded by farm ground, there are some other existing homes in the vicinity. Another rural home would appear consistent. And this dwelling will have a lot of screening with the woodland around it, so from the road, you're probably not gonna see a real dramatic difference in how the neighborhood environment appears. And, 5, that the proposed use organizes vehicular access and parking to minimize conflicting traffic movement on adjacent streets. So there's plenty of room for off-street parking, as 2 spaces are required, and there's 10 acres. And finally, the proposed use shall promote the objectives of the ordinance and be consistent with the comprehensive plan. So objective 1, policy 1 of the 2012 comprehensive plan states to minimize development on agricultural land. The Forest Township Future Land Use Plan designates the area for primarily agricultural land. The proposed new lot is all woodland and mostly wetland, so it is not practical for farm ground, and the new lot should not adversely affect the future plan of continued agricultural use. Also, given there are well over 80 acres of undeveloped farmland surrounding these 3 homes, an average of 1 home per 20 acres, which is the density we ideally look for in the agricultural district, is still being maintained. Consequently, staff recommends to approve the request for 1 home, assuming that, we know there's room around the wetlands, but assuming that we have septic suitability, with the note, of course, that, minor subdivision approval will be necessary from the plan commission to work out the final details on the lot. Then, Kat, I'm gonna hand it to you, because I thought that you had said you had some updates, but I wasn't seeing it. Yep, we have min specs for the septic.
Ms. Rodney's,
Yeah, it will require perimeter drainage to 54 inches or a little bit more, but it is suitable for a septic, and they can work out, the details on the septic design and outlets at their subdivision stage.
and then this is from the U.S. Corps of Engineers, and so they're saying that according to that.
Yep, so they said, I don't know how well you can tell, there was the home site is kind of drawn out here, and that was sent to the Corps of Engineers. And yes, we did get a reply back from them that based on soil information they received, there's wetland soils, but not wetland vegetation. And since there's not all the criteria for a wetland, they don't consider that area of the house to be, and a permit under the Clean Water Act will not be necessary to be able to put the house and drive-in as proposed. They're avoiding the areas that are of sensitive concern. So, back to our staff recommendation of approving the 1 lot. It seems like a good balance between, protecting our different resources and still having some development.
Thank you. Is the applicant here?
Yes.
Do you have anything you'd like to add?
No.
Nope. Do we have anyone else that'd like to add anything?
Yes.
Sir.
Ned Smith.
Ned Smith, partner in the land owned around it, and I've got a family member that owns some on the other side. We farm this land, and part of the partial was bought out of the same sale. What I understood, she said northwest side would be good for a house. I think probably all of you've got or I suppose you got a picture of their planned program. And their septic, it's clear to the back in the wetland part. So I think there's a big misunderstanding from me how you can build a house in a wetland there when the northwest corner, which would be close to the road, is the only one that it shows it's available. Besides that, we have I believe I've been told, 150-foot setback from the right-of-way on the sides of the road, which would be a fence line, which would push it back farther. We also have side pushbacks, which makes it tighter yet. And then I've had since 1980 a manure applicator's permit on that land, which would keep you 100 foot from a well, if I understand all that right from IDM when I wrote that, and I think that rule's still in effect. Could be checked. I couldn't get anybody from IDM to tell me that still, but that was what my permit said back. I think it was clear back in 1980. So, do you all have the picture of the proposed spot where the house is going to be?
I can add some clarity to that. So at the time the staff report was written, we didn't have response from Corps of Engineers. We knew there was at least a couple acres out of the wetland that everything could fit in. If you want to see it, Corps of Engineers has reviewed, so these wetland areas were drawn in about 1977 by a guy in Washington based off of maps. So, for example, all of our hog lagoons are labeled freshwater wetlands and preserved as clean water for drinking on these maps.
It's good to
They're
know.
not freshwater
That's good to
wetlands.
know. I got some, I'll sell you.
Yeah, exactly. But I guess the point of that is, they're wildly inaccurate. They're rarely as big as what they appear to be, and then frankly, sometimes we find wetlands that aren't designated, but are actually wetlands when the studies are done. So what federal law says is the Corps of Engineers, and we're in a region that the Louisville office has this responsibility over. When something like this occurs, they have to review the soils and a report from somebody local who specializes in that about what's on that site to determine whether or not it's really a wetland. So they sent this drawing of where they want to put the house to the Corps of Engineers. You're welcome to come up and look at it. And the Corps of Engineers, since the writing of the staff report, has noted that the house and septic location, which will sit kind of to the, looks like to me based on this compass, the straight east. Am I orienting that correctly? Is out of the wetlands, and we have that directly from Corps of Engineers. They're the authority over that to do the review, so there will not be a conflict with the house being placed there, as long as they do it within the next 5 years, because Corps of Engineer approvals have to be redone if not acted upon within a certain amount of time. As far as setbacks, the setbacks in the agricultural zoning district are 50 foot from a road right of way. I'm not sure where the 150 understanding came from, but
Sorry.
50 from a road right of way, 15 foot from a side lot line, and 20 foot from a rear lot line. Where there are wetlands on a site, they have to be marked if they're within 100 foot of a construction area for the period of construction, so that everyone knows where they are and they don't accidentally get trampled. It's really hard in these wooded lots to have any clue where the wetland begins, so a surveyor has to mark that during the construction process. And then, since this is subject to the subdivision ordinance, it does have to have a permanent agricultural covenant placed on it should it be developed, which states that any owner of this lot in perpetuity has no right to take action against general agricultural practices, will not protect a farmer who dumps hog manure straight down the well, but if they're spreading on the field in a way that's compliant with their write-in permits, it does protect them. And then we have a reciprocal enforcement clause that gives any landowner within a quarter mile the right to enforce the covenants for additional protection. So those things at the subdivision stage, those are actually required in county ordinance. They're not conditions that would be unique to this. Any development in the ag area, we put that on because usually the people that build it are fine, but sometimes things buy and sell. And making sure that when people come in, they get handed those covenants and say, hey, you're moving into an agricultural community. And not only are you moving into it, and these are the things you can expect to find, but you have no right to object to it. And should you attempt to, it's not going to stand up or get you anywhere, because when you purchased your house, you accepted these covenants. So now as to the rest, like, that's board discussion, but I just wanted to clarify why it seemed like there was a conflict between locations. Had this been a site where there was no space for a house, it wouldn't have made it to the point of a hearing. Now, with the Corps of Engineers approval, they can move it over to where they ideally would like to put it. But if Corps of Engineers had come back and said, no, that's all wetland, then they were willing to locate it in the corner up closer to the road that was outside of the wetland. And we measured that space off as more than an acre there. There's enough room for an average sized home, or a less than average sized home should the buyer be willing to downsize the home to fit in the space. So that's where that seeming conflict came from. So just to clarify that, and then I'll hand that off, but that's where that ended up.
So just for clarity, are you objecting?
Yes, yes.
Why?
Could I pass out some maps that I've got from our farm? I mean, it's maps of our farm. Would that be acceptable?
Sure. Thank you.
picture as well, just so they can follow along in the conversation.
Okay, one is just showing that how much of that, this is from NRCS, Chris Torp, he's a wetland determination person on the work team at Lebanon. He'd formerly been in Clinton County and still represents Clinton County. We're around, all the way around this. What we're really worried about is more water flow. We're actually over what we can handle now. We bought this farm and it has some tile in it. It's got a lot of broken down tile, which we fixed, but we're still working on some places that are low. And actually, the Indians or whoever they were, they went around some of these ponds, and we're trying to work with the drainage board and get those corrected. The very north end of that property is a bowl. It's very low, very, very low. All the water in that woods, what doesn't stand in the woods, the overflow runs into our field, so we're carrying all that, and we have quite a few breakdowns north of that. Page 2 just shows the soil types, and most of the whole area of ground in this 10 acres there is shown as cyclone, and 85% of it's hydraulic, which means it doesn't drain well at all. Page 3, just an overview of different wetlands in that area, which this particular tract drains to the north. Actually, it never gets to the creek. We don't think there's any tile to the creek, the Kilmore Creek. There's a railroad bridge, and it just kind of stops there is all we found. And it pools and eventually goes down some because it is downhill. The last page is the one I want to really emphasize, that it shows the water that stands on it. And even with the trees, you can see how that woods, especially in the center, up to the yellow spot north of this site, is a bowl. It goes through the neighbor's backyard, and when it rains 3 inches, it goes through it fast. I mean, we've got problems there, and we really can't handle any more. These people are looking for perimeter drain. We need a new 24-inch or something going clear to the Kilmore, and it's all trees up there. It's gonna take a lot of money to get that done. So we're already suffering on this. We're trying to drain behind the woods where that goes and heads up in that corner and goes north. There is another one that goes under the railroad where all that yellow is to the north of that, and it's small, and it goes through a bunch of wooded land of 2 different landowners to get there. It does work, but it's very impeding on our farm here. We have some areas in here that we have no crop this year, and we waited till last to plant that just because we had a very wet spring. And usually this tract they're wanting to build on has water standing. The gentleman that cattle farmed it before made it a summer pasture when all the water went down, and he grazed it for a long time. It wasn't very thick. I mean, it wasn't as near as thick as it is now because it kept grazed down, and the cattle had ate some of the light trees that made it so thick, and it worked for him he owned it for probably 40 years. So that's our main concern, is we're already way overloaded, and to the south we have a drainage problem on my tenant's ground there. We have got a main to it, but we haven't got all the fingers replaced on it yet, or the permits to do that. We've got them open main, but the fingers are about 90%. We had Mr. Brewer was supposed to be doing a plan on it, and then he quit doing drainage, so we're working on somebody else to do that now, but we're ways out with getting permission from the county to assist them and get it set up and get it working. So that pretty well surrounds that whole property. It is a very, 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 very wet area that if you wait long enough in the spring, you can farm it. And we're trying to fix what's there. A lot of it's very old, and we put in some new too, but we don't think we can handle any more water. And the neighbor to the north, like I said, it rains 2 inches in his backyard's, I mean, it's just the way it's gonna be. It's a flood. Even if we get new tile in there, it's still gonna be that thing is a bowl, and I don't mean a foot or two. You can look from front to the back and lose your pickup truck. I mean, it's,
So you feel like a house there is going to put a lot more water onto your property? Is that what you're saying?
it will some, yeah, what, you've got the amount Rodney put on, 630 gallon a day on a purge system. That's a lot. I mean, we're talking a 6-inch tile, not a 24 or a big main like in town. I mean, we're talking a large area and you're trying to shove all that through. They're gonna be, a lot of times, producing more water than all the field put together and when it's not raining. I mean, it's just, it doesn't work out. And I talked to Rodney a couple days ago, and there was a few things he didn't know where the house was. He said it wasn't gonna work, and I don't know if he got with Liz or not on that, but he didn't know the house was gonna be clear at the back in the wetland, which means they're gonna have to put a driveway over that, and that would hold and impede some more water. I mean, yeah, I think it will. We got more than we can handle now. Lot, man, there's no quick fix to this. Very expensive. Like I said, we've got 2 landowners to the north. We'd like to have like a 24-inch tile getting up there. That'd be a half a mile to get rid of 80 acres worth of water. I mean, it doesn't sound like much when you have a nice gentle rain, but for some reason anymore, we seem to either get none or 4 inches. And what, in 19, I planted that late because it was dry, or wouldn't get dry. Planted it, 3 days later, we got the 3-inch rain on it, and all gone. The whole place there was underwater for a day. I mean, just complete, running down the road. You can't appreciate how wet it is in that area until you see it, but I mean, that's what this yellow map shows, the really places that pond and stay ponded for long term. I mean, the scale will show you that. So, anyway, thank you, Ward.
I would note, I guess, 2 things. One, Rodney's approval was not a phone call or something like that. It's full set of min specs signed by the health department, issued on 9/20. So I don't know where the disconnect was, but he formally approved it. It wasn't an informal. And then 2, obviously drainage is certainly a concern, because if there's no perimeter drain outlet, it has to have one. So, obviously I don't know where the board will fall, but one possible recommendation, if you're unsure, would be to table and let them go to drainage board and see if they're willing to be part of a financial solution that's comprehensive. It also includes a solution for them to drain. Typically at this stage of the game, perimeter drainage outlet hasn't been looked for yet. They just know that they need one. So, that's the question, is whether there is or isn't. And I don't know if they've done any research. Maybe a question for the petitioner. They may have some weigh in on where they believe a tile to be or what kind of functionality they think might be out there.
Yeah.
But I guess what I'm pointing out is drainage is obviously, you don't want a house that floods, you don't want a septic that floods, which, nothing against a field, but usually one house doesn't produce a prohibitive amount of runoff. But if a septic's not functioning, that is a concern.
So if you figure it up, you said what, 650 gallons of discharge a day was what the figure that you used?
That's what I understood.
Okay, so if you take an acre inch, which is how many gallons it takes to produce
No.
an inch of water, it's about 27,000 gallons of water.
Hang on, we have an incorrect assumption.
Okay,
The 630 is the dosing volume.
is the
This
dosing.
is requiring a dosing tank. So I happen to have a dosing system. This does not mean that 630 gallons a day is going to
Yeah.
be flowing out into the field. This means that a dosing tank has to collect a certain amount, and then every so often, so like I have a 250 gallon dosing tank, it only doses maybe
A quarter
every
of
so many
that.
days or
Yeah.
whatever, like, and the reason is because, in areas like I have a repair to my system, so I don't have a perimeter drain, even though a new house would have required it. So, the dosing tank was done so that there's not constantly wet fingers, so then when it doses, it absorbs better. So it's not, it's a dosing volume, not a daily volume.
Okay.
So you carry on with your calculations.
Well,
I just wanted to
anyway,
make sure it was-
the way I looked at it, if we were pumping out that many gallons a day, It would be the equivalent of taking that 10 acres and putting an extra inch on it over the course of a year when you did all the calculations. So, I mean, if it can't handle another inch of water, then over the course of the year, then we're in trouble. But, and it is wet. I drove by the site, so, you guys have your work cut out for you on that. And that's just an ornery area. I'm kind of surprised, do you guys not have, tiles on either side of that railroad? Because I know everywhere that I
One goes
run.
through the center.
And it goes through that wooded area there, and it probably has problems there.
It actually does pretty good, but it's only a 6 inch, and
Yep,
it's a long ways from where we're talking.
yeah, I
And
mean,
the other
I,
side has, I won't say it doesn't have one. We can't find one down at the interurban or the viaduct for the railroad. It just,
it's built.
actually, we're on top, we're at the
I
top.
wonder if it didn't get a gravel,
We need to have
Pop.
him go to the mic or repeat what he's saying,
Oh,
because
okay.
I know we do have viewers.
yeah, sorry.
Um,
But go ahead and make your comments on the railroad real quick.
so I just know we do have some people watching, so they're gonna be puzzled about
Sure.
what the conversation is.
We've done extensive tiling on this and fixed a lot of old tiles, as most of it, to get started, because they've been neglected for a while. The center of the property, our property, which is, it's not a half a mile. The Kilmore Creek is probably half a mile downhill from this site, around some hills. There is a 6-inch tile that goes underneath the railroad that is functioning, or was the last time I was back there before the drought of the summer. And we ran a tracer on it, clear to the creek. It does go through. I don't know how it works, because it's very, very heavy wooded. But you use what you got, and if it breaks down, I'm not sure how we're gonna get back there over the railroad. We'd have to clear a lot of trees, or maybe go down the railroad track and fall off it and dig this tile up and put a new one in, which trees will, I'm guessing it's an old clay tile, so trees can get in that very easily, because every gap in 8 inches is an open spot for a root, and boy, they will find it. I mean,
Yeah.
that's all they do is find it. The side along 800, we found the tile there, and we did some work on it because it was broken down. It actually sets on top of the ground right underneath the viaduct. We haven't looked any further because it's wooded on north of there. It goes on top of the ground. It's actually lower than, it's the lowest point, but we've got an area there. If you drive by, look at the railroad track, we couldn't grow anything on it this year. It drowned and clear out, and we mowed it to keep the weeds down, but there's tile there, but it just
It's not
too
working.
much. I mean, it drowns us out, and east of that on your map, you can see that turns into all yellow, and if you got too much water, it takes it all out. I mean, we haven't yet, I don't think yet, had a crop clear through those inroads yet. I mean, it just, we've got stuck there a few times too. So as far as I know, there is no tile. It would help a lot if we could get one on north, but like I said, it needs to be a big one, and it's gotta go through 2 landowners and tear down a lot of trees to get.
Get through.
It probably did at one time, maybe, I don't know, but it got pinched up. Maybe they're just trying to drain on top of the ground. Actually, there's a culvert to go across the road to a gravel pit, but it didn't quite make it to the gravel pit. I don't know why they put it where they did. As far as I can tell, that culvert's probably a 4-footer. It does nothing other than let more water pond across the neighbor, and they cleared it out once, and they've let it go back to trees because they couldn't keep it dry enough to keep a crop growing, so they just let it grow back up. And that's been probably in the last 10 years. They cleaned it out, took all the trees down and tried farming it, but like I said, any of those big rains, we cinder all in one spot. It can't get to the creek, it can't get to the gravel pit, which that would be great, but it's not capable. So that map shows quite a few places. You can see the dark areas up there behind them and to the south and the north, both. Many years, most years, we can't even drive through, against their property, as low as that is, and it just drowned it out. I mean, sometime during the year. We probably got more on it this year because we waited last to plant it. We lost some small spots, but not the large ones. And we fixed some tiles and made it better, but got a long way to go yet.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. We have other board discussion?
I'd like-
Anybody else out here got anything to say or add?
I'd just like to say there is an old well on the property and there's a tile.
Could you step up to the microphone, please?
We looked at it with the current owner now, and there's a well on it'd be the northeast side. There's a well there, and there's also a fill tile on the property. I'm not sure where it goes, but it looked like it ran down the lane back towards 800. So I guess Rodney would be the one to tell us if we can use that or not. It looks like, I mean, the builder, once he does his elevations, they're not, he'll tell us how high to get the house, build the house and all that, so. We'd still like to build out there, you know, we're not putting harm on the farmer, but
Yeah.
we've looked long and hard for land to build on.
Is there any way that I could see the Corps of Engineers and the Rodney's report? I'm just curious.
I would have brought it to you. There's the minimum system design specs.
Okay.
And that was Rodney's email that came with it
Okay.
at the top, and then this is gonna take you a moment to read through. 'Cause
That's fine.
there's a whole email chain attached on the end of it. Okay, so here's what was sent, here's the Corps of Engineers, the actual response from the Corps is here, and then the applicant forwarded
Okay.
that to us. So it's
Okay.
everything from the Corps.
Thanks.
Did you guys get an email from the landowner to the south of Brookbanks?
No, we haven't received any you're the first correspondence we've seen. If we'd been, if we'd known, we'd have said something about your
Well, I
concerns
figured
in our
so,
report.
that's why I was concerned. I thought she was gonna make a statement.
We haven't heard from anyone.
She lives out of state, is why that's what we were gonna try doing the email thing.
No, if we get something emailed or sent by snail mail, we always distribute it out to our board members and to the petitioner, so everyone's aware of any known issues ahead of the hearing and prepared to discuss them.
Okay. There we go. That's what I wanted to see. Oh, man. Who puts a map that's not north as the top of the page? Yeah, I'm right there. Does anybody else want to look at this? This is like the site plan. I didn't know.
I'll look at it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I'll look through this real quick. Sorry, I won't take my time on this. Dose tank, okay, there's the dose. Septic tank. wanna see this one?
No, I'm good.
Okay. That's right in the middle where that proposed wetland is. I don't know, I mean, that's.
Not unusual, though.
No, I mean, you know, you get,
They're so inaccurately drawn, I wish, not that I want more federal overreach, but I do wish that they would put the funding into redrawing those maps with current satellite imagery and current soil information, because most places in the US now, we have that information. In the 70s, they didn't have it. So it was just pure guessing. I feel like they could make a much more educated guess.
so is the proposed septic gonna go to the east of the house?
That's a question for the petition.
Septic will be north. West side?
So for the recording, the petitioner stated the subject will be to the northwest side of the house.
Okay,
The old well's on the east side and the septic, the one we're proposing is supposed to be on the west side.
The old well's on the east side. I'm just repeating so you don't have to watch the mic.
Now, Liz, I'm thinking you did say that the new landowner would be required to get a perimeter drain in this area.
Correct, which does require an outlet of adequate depth, and if it has to, if they don't have an on-site outlet, then, they would need to acquire an easement to go off-site. It can't be in the road right of way, and it does have to be functioning. You know, typically, they dig them up, wherever it is, they dig it up and you test.
Yeah, so if it's not in the road right away, it has to go from here somehow to the creek.
I'm gonna presume that usually everything drains to a nearby creek in a watershed. They will have to get drainage board approval as well before they can get to their subdivision stage, so there's, not just for underground, but a surface water gets looked at by drainage board, which if, that was my thought, if the board was unsure as opposed to making a decision, you could table them and ask them to go prematurely, so to speak, to the drainage board to have a conversation and look at that with other landowners. If there's a drainage, if there's not adequate drainage, but there's a drainage solution that people are working on and they're willing to pay into that financially, and maybe there's a way to solve everybody's problem. But also the drainage board would have more information if there are any problems, what the nature of them are. If the board feels comfortable, you have the right to approve or deny or approve with conditions. Just letting you know there is a third option in the middle,
And that would be to send them to the drainage board
to try to get some more information about what's going on from, an entity with.
and even maybe a combined resolution between the farmer and the landowner.
I hesitate to make that a condition on any case, because quite frankly, you often in BZA hearings, not just here, you have two very valid opinions with two
Right.
different sets of interests, and if they can find consensus, that's great. But to give one unique power over the other
Yeah.
can be challenging.
You
The
know,
question is,
We're not eliminating it,
So-
but it is a possibility.
So-
But they could go to the board to get the drainage permit first.
it's certainly the best situation where you can get agreement, but if you can't, then the board's job is to ultimately decide what set of interests.
so
precedence.
approval happens, they have to go to the drainage board because of what's going on here, and then we'll see it in APC, or I'll see it in APC if everything's A-okay there.
You will.
So it's going to drainage board if we approve it, or continue it and make them go to drainage board. So I don't see there's any reason for us to, we either need to be approving it tonight or denying it, and one way or the other, well, if we approve it, it's going to drainage board. I mean, that's just my opinion.
Yeah, so my thoughts are that, no matter what, the board's job, in my opinion, is to make sure that they meet the requirements of the special exception.
Exception, yep.
That's our job,
Yep,
I might-
not to get in the middle of the debate between drainage.
well,
They have requirements that they have to meet.
Unless you believe that it's unbuildable.
Exactly,
In which case-
exactly.
Because I would note
Which
that
that's up to,
I would actually say if there are some concerns and if you do wish to approve, I might ask that this be one of the rare situations where you put an expiration date on your approval, only because we had some in the nineties that were approved through by the BZA and then could never make it through the APC, and then realtors sell them because special exceptions, continue for a while as buildable. And now special exceptions run with the land permanently, they don't expire in 3 years like they used to. So, and we did that for reasons, because we kept having people come back through, but it might make sense to put a 1 or 2 year expiration, just so if they can't get the approvals, you don't have a special exception approval hanging out there where someone unscrupulous can say to
Right.
other potential buyers and put them in the same situation.
So
"Hey,
we
it's
approved the
buildable."
special exception, they can't get drainage board approval, APC approval.
If they get stuck, then after a certain amount of time, that special exception approval would expire if you put a date on it. And then some new buyer down the road couldn't buy it believing they had something buildable and then have to re-go through what this applicant did of getting dead-ended on drainage.
Yeah,
It
yeah, I'm
wouldn't
good
have
with
an
that.
approval then, cause otherwise your approval runs permanently with the land. So if people are scrupulous, it's fine, but if they're not, then what tends to happen with those, we had a number of them by Rossville, has happened year after year, where they get sold, the buyers would come in believing that they were good to go, then they'd hit the same roadblock the last guy did, and it gets sold again. And it was, you can't control what realtors say, they shouldn't do it, but it does happen.
Technically, the board should put that clause on every exception, right? So that,
Well, I would argue in most cases, you have assurance that it's buildable, and
Yeah.
it's a matter of meeting standards. But if there's a concern that it might truly not be buildable,
okay.
then I guess as staff, I would recommend considering some kind of reasonable make it reasonable, make it enough time that if there's a problem that needs to be addressed that takes some engineering and money, there's time to sort through that. But if it truly turns out to be not solvable, we're not, as staff dealing with it 5 to 10 years from now, as person after person think that they can put a house there and then meet the same problem. And I rarely say that, most cases are pretty definitive, but if it were to turn out that that tile does not function and there's no way to get the water off, I'd hate to have something sitting here for the next 50 years where people are calling in trying to buy it, going, hey, it shows it's approved for a home site, and all it has to do is meet the standards, not realizing that it can't physically meet a standard to finish the process. So, I mean, I'm not saying you make that 6 months, a year, even 2 years. I mean, I'm not all that bothered
Yeah.
by short-term memory, we're gonna know about the lot, but I don't want it just hanging forever. That concerns me if it turns out that it can't be resolved.
And there are ways that they could avoid the need to have a perimeter drain, but it's just a lot more expensive type of,
No, I don't know of
Not,
any way you can
not
avoid a
on this,
perimeter drain
not
if
on
it's
this
needed.
one.
well, if you do a bounce system, you can.
You still have a perimeter drain
Still have
that
to
goes at the
drain.
surface, and then it drains off, so you gain yourself some depth, but you don't eliminate the need.
You're not.
So what a mound system might do is allow them to have a shallower drainage outlet than an in-ground system, but they're still gonna have to have it. So if there's no way to get the water off, that's a problem. If the tile will get the water off, but it's not deep enough, then a mound system
Then they
might
may
solve
be
the
able to
problem.
discharge into their wetlands.
A wetland though still has to drain to something, that's gonna be the,
Well, but if you have an outlet for your perimeter drain,
oh, yeah, but
Yeah.
the perimeter drain outlet is
Essentially,
gonna be
they took
going
this.
to a location, not a
He looked
wetland,
at
it's
that,
gonna
and
be
they essentially
discharging.
took the wetland
Well,
completely out.
I mean, it can sheet.
Yeah, you can outlet on site if you have enough fall,
Yeah.
but in this case, you're gonna have almost 7 foot of fall and you're in a bowl.
And it's, and
Well,
then
that's
you're in
why
a
I was saying
teacup
if you had a
anyway,
perimeter drain, you might be able to do it.
You still need 3 foot of fall though.
cause
I
this
don't
is
know.
all, this is all.
Yeah, I don't know.
site.
Well,
If-
but
if
how
they
much,
can
how
make
much
it-
fall is there from here to,
That's it.
it
It says it's
fall
a
is
flat
there.
soil
either
type,
side of
so
the
I
house.
would guess not much unless it's
Well, there must be
Place.
some,
I mean, he
because
said it's visible,
you got
so-
that, you got a bowl there.
I mean, I guess at the end of the day, that's gonna be something that engineers and, if there's a way to do it,
Yeah, I mean,
great.
you guys are buying a tough lot to build on. And
I just think if there's a question, having an expiration on a special exception
Oh, I
versus
agree with
running with
that.
the land
I agree with that.
perpetually until the end
I
of
don't know if it'll
time
get
or the
done.
world ends, whatever comes first,
All right, yep. So let me throw this out, see if we can all agree or disagree. I'll make a motion that we approve, subject to the findings of the staff report incorporated here within. And I'd also like to add to this the fact that should they not meet drainage board requirements, the ability to tie into a perimeter tile, say within a 2-year period, that the special exception will,
I'd recommend, and I guess, not to mind the motion, but I'd recommend an easier, I would just say if they haven't completed subdivision approval within that 2 years, and not worry about the whys.
yeah, because of subdivision, they're gonna need all
They
that
have
anyway.
to get all the
They're gonna-
drainage in order to have an approved and recorded subdivision, so I would
Perfect.
just tie it into
All right, yep,
to that, because then if they get an initial denial from the drainage board, but then it's because of something that can be solved and money's thrown at it and landowners work it out and you put in a 24-inch tile or whatever
okay.
it takes, you know.
So
and
should,
they
should
get
we
done.
push it with, subject to getting,
Subdivision.
subdivision approval within 2 years?
So with the condition that your special exception approval will expire if subdivision approval is not obtained within 2 years.
Agreed, yes. Do we have a second?
Second.
And we'll do a roll call vote.
Okay, you're gonna have to give me just a moment.
Yep. I'm just trying to move it along,
That's right,
because we can debate all night long
that's right.
until the experts get out there and do their thing. We won't really know, you know?
Can you read the motion once you, please?
You want me to repeat it back?
No, have her what she wrote down. I'm just kinda curious.
At the moment, I
I
have.
think I can do it, though.
Approved, subject to the findings of the staff report incorporated by reference with the condition that the special exception approval will expire if subdivision approval is not completed within 2 years.
Correct. And we have a second.
It's Grant.
Grant?
Are you ready for?
Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am?
So with that being the motion, Scott Hudson,
Yes.
Andy Bailey,
No.
Stacy Pettigo,
Yes.
Chester Bankus,
Yes,
Grant Waller.
Yes.
Okay, so approve with that condition. I would note, your next step's gonna be to start in your subdivision process, and drainage is gonna be part of that. And you're gonna have to locate a perimeter outlet as well that's suitable, so you're gonna have some work cut out for you. Also, make sure you know, there's gonna be a drainage board hearing. It's gonna be part of this process. There's gonna be a subdivision hearing. I'm not sure on drainage board how notice works, but I know for our subdivision hearing, you'll get a similar letter and see a sign. You might, you know, if there's no contact between parties, you might just call the surveyor's office periodically and see if they've gotten anything filed, or at least call and ask if notice goes out in a similar manner and if you'll receive it, or if you need to try to track it to know when. Because it seems with your concern being about drainage, that drainage board conversation is gonna be of particular relevance. And for the plan commission, when it comes back to them, if they have drainage board approval, that's not a location where the details get discussed, so you wanna make sure you hit that drainage board hearing. So, other than that, you're good, you've got 2 years if you don't have the subdivision completed by then. But I assume your goal is to either get it done or find somewhere else that works, so.
So will they put us on the, like, let us know when the drainage board is, or we get
You'll
ahold of them?
need to.
You'll need to go out
You'll need to
there.
get someone to help you, to get information together and get it to the surveyor. And, you might call the county surveyor and just ask what you need to get them in order to be heard. Let them know you've got a potential house site, and they should be able to tell you what you need. And then for the perimeter drain, you're gonna need to find somebody who can help you locate an outlet and determine if it's suitable and of enough depth or not. Those are two different things.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Okay, let's see, so we've got to, it looks like we need a motion to,
I don't know where it goes after that, but there's gotta be one to go.
override the filing deadline, right?
If we were able to get notice out and everything properly, but, we can take it a day late.
But if there's-
And it is 20 days?
20 days is the requirement. And typically, if we already have things docketed and we can make advertising work, we typically take them, because otherwise, you're just gonna get it pushed to your next meeting, and we're
Yep.
getting into the fall, so.
Okay, I'll make a motion, we waive the filing deadline of 20 days to 19 days.
Second.
We'll just do a quick roll call vote on it, please.
Scott Hesensberger?
Yes.
Andy Bailey?
Yes.
Stacy Pettico?
Yes.
Chester Backus?
Yes.
Grant Muller?
Yes.
Okay,
Filing deadline waived, 5-0.
perfect. Docket 2922 VA. You'll take us through the staff report.
Yes, this is the application of William Royer, requesting a setback variance to construct a pole barn 30-foot from a road right-of-way line instead of the required 50-foot. The parcel itself is zoned agriculturally, as is the land directly on all sides of it, but there is some B4 general business kind of catty corner to the west. You can see that on the map. This petition site's on the east side of North State Road 29 in section 23 of Warren Township. It's actually at the corner of, I believe it's 950 North, and has frontage on both roads. The petitioner has a home on the site. He'd like to construct a detached pole barn on the property that will sit 30 foot from the edge of East County Road 950 North's right-of-way. The Unified Development Ordinance requires a 50-foot setback from the road right-of-way in the A1 zoning district, and so that generates the need for the variance. On the second page, there's a drawing that illustrates where they're proposing to place the pole barn, and Kat kind of noted where everything is and how it relates. And there's a picture, I believe this house previously, it's a little bit odd, it's got this giant concrete area outside of it, and I believe it previously was a commercial use at some point in its history. Somebody had told me that it was an office of some sort, and I could be wrong, petitioner can correct,
You're right.
am I correct? I was thinking somebody told me, maybe it was you when you came in, that it was once upon a time a commercial use, and so that's why you have this kind of this odd configuration with the drives and lots. So, the Unified Development Ordinance specifies 3 findings that must exist to grant a variance. First, that the approval will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community. So this site is on a corner lot, and the proposed location for the new pole barn is 50 foot from the center of East 950 North, which includes a 20-foot road right-of-way, and then the 30-foot of setback from the edge of the right-of-way. The intersection has traffic that comes from all directions except the west, as 950 North stops at 29 when it comes from the east. The proposed pole barn will be far enough northeast of the intersection to avoid obstructing sight lines for vehicles, and the adjacent property is farm ground, so there doesn't appear to be any injurious condition being created. 2, the use and value of the area adjacent to the property included in the variance will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. So this area is zoned agriculturally, it's surrounded mostly by farm ground. Proposed pole barn does seem to mesh with the area and not create any kind of issue. 3, the strict application of the terms of the zoning ordinance will result in practical difficulties in the use of the property. So if the accessory structure is required to meet the 50-foot setback from the right-of-way, because the variance requested is denied, then it will have to relocate elsewhere on the property, and that would not be adequately accessible from the existing driveway, and the petitioner's wife has difficulty walking, which is why they have a need for a building for vehicles that is close to the house. Additionally, if they relocated to the other side of the house, as the health department noted, it would create conflict with the location that would be set aside for a septic replacement, should one be needed, and this being an older structure at some point, sooner rather than later, it's likely that it may need a septic. So there's always that concern on lots with a lot of concrete, that you're not eliminating the possibility of a septic replacement in where you place accessory structures. But also note that placing it towards State Road 29, if you're going to look at variances, would be less desirable, as that's a higher trafficked road, than placing it towards the county road side. There is an adjacent parcel to the east that is in common ownership. The petitioner feels that it would be too far for the petitioner's wife to be able to access, and is concerned about removing farm ground from productive tillable use. So the petitioner would like to propose to place the pole barn 18 foot from his house according to the site plan. Staff would note that the required setback from the house is only 10 feet, which would seem easier to walk to. So the pole barn could actually be placed 8 foot closer to the house, which would be 8 foot further from the road, and still meet the required setback to the house. But the board should discuss whether to grant the requested distance or a lesser variance distance. Staff did wrestle with whether there's actually a hardship in moving it that additional 8 foot of any kind or definition. Staff would like to note as well that when we were checking distances on Beacon and comparing it to the site plan, 30 feet may not be enough. We had some question if the measurements actually lined up, and some concern that they may need to move the pole barn closer to the house anyway to meet the required 30 feet. So if the board looked at making that less as opposed to making it a number, it might be better to require it to sit at the minimum setback from the house and go no larger than what they've planned, so it moves back whatever distance that is. But I know Kat had driven out past there, and she's just concerned there may be a discrepancy in the measurement, and we're gonna have to double check it, so wanted to make sure we're talking about adjustments, that everyone's aware of that. Staff does recommend to approve the variance. If the board approves a variance, you should discuss and determine if you're going to approve that at the 30 foot, or if a lesser variance moving the building to its minimum permitted setback from the house would be more appropriate, whether there's a hardship in pushing it out 18 feet instead of putting it at 10.
Okay, thank you. Is the applicant here? Do you have anything you'd like to add?
The pole that powers the house goes right beside it. You can see it
Yep.
on the picture on the back front page.
Yep.
That's why we went 18 feet out from the house, so we were well past that.
I'd bury it, man. I love burying wires. Get them things out of the sky. What about the propane tank? You got to move your propane tank to move back to the east. Okay.
Actually, I don't know how far away it is from where the building would be, but pretty close. It would still be pretty good distance from the building, the back of the building.
Is there a certain distance?
We don't enforce setbacks on propane tanks,
That-
but we have been told by companies that deal with propane that do worry about setbacks, that a 10 foot is usually standard.
That's what I was gonna say. 10's what most of the
I'm
companies say.
sure, I'm almost positive it's more than 10, but I'm not.
Yeah, we measured.
And they will wanna relocate it if it's closer than to.
What's
I've already
the
talked to Newell, they said they'd move it back.
what's the dimensions of the building? I'm just kinda curious, like height
Well,
and,
we're gonna go with a 50 by 40, but, we're
Okay.
gonna go and take it down and make it a 40 by
40 by 30.
Yeah.
How tall's it gonna be? Just curious. 12
I
foot.
Taller than 12, 40
Yeah,
is
not-
the road though.
I was wanting to be able to put an automobile lift in it.
Okay.
I used to be a car mechanic, so 12-foot ceiling height is what I would need, but.
Oh, okay, there we go.
They
Cool.
actually
toward the road.
made, truss differently where you could have a.
So you could have the clearance that you
yeah,
needed in the center of the
10-foot
building.
height.
Yeah.
Yep, cool. Okay, I was just curious.
We weren't quite sure there, depends on the trusses, I guess, but it wouldn't be any taller than 12.
Is 950 North gravel there? I'm pretty
Yes.
sure. Yeah, okay.
So Liz, the full variance is the actual variance that's being requested, right?
Correct, the 30 feet, and that includes by their measurements being 18 foot from the house.
Yeah.
But the minimum required setback from the house is 10 feet, which would seem to indicate that it's being placed 8 foot closer than where there's actually a practical difficulty.
Unless
Oh.
you consider the.
Unless you consider the telephone pole to be a practical difficulty,
I don't know if it is
as
or not.
opposed to relocating it.
There's a cost.
But, yeah, I mean, you look at it, I think, I don't have too much problems with this.
Can I say,
As it's written?
from the middle of
Yeah.
950
either.
to where we wanna have the building coming out from the house area, it's almost 50 feet, 49 feet.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
I'm
I
not
mean, if we just grant the special exception and they stay within the 20
The
feet
full
of
variance,
of the building, I mean, if we went with a 50 by 40, man, that was my concern, was how
Yeah,
big are
I
we
felt
gonna
like
be?
that was just too big for this
And I don't think it'd fit in there very nicely.
I think it would overpower and make the house look maybe silly. So,
Well, I would note, you can grant variance to whatever degree, but there is no law that would cause me to deny the permit if they added 10 foot, as long as they still were 30.
Exactly, as long as they,
Right.
yeah, and I'm not worried about that, but I'm just saying, if we,
I'm not gonna add 10 feet.
If
You have to put a
if they had
condition
10
on
feet,
it.
they gotta go closer to their house.
Yeah.
I was thinking dumb, you know, I'm a city guy, you know, this is my first time to live out in the country, and I never had a big building, you know, before, so. 50
Not the
by-
bigger the better.
50
you
by
just
30,
build them
wow,
bigger,
you know,
you just
now
build them bigger
I'd be
than what
happy
you think you
with,
need.
40 by 30, or even smaller, you know, just
I will tell you, no one has ever come into my office, no farmer, no property owner, and said, that building I pulled a permit for last year, I built it too big.
You
But
bet.
I can't count the number of times, especially farmers have come in 6 months to a year later and said, I need an addition on the tool shed, which is not actually a shed, because I built it too small.
Exactly, if you're ever gonna build one, build it big. Yeah, if it fits, I think the 30's fine off of that road, it's far enough off the highway. It's not like we're impeding on neighbors that are across the road today.
So it's 30 feet from the
Road
right.
right
Which is
away.
50 foot from the center of the road,
Road,
when you
yep.
measure out, there's a 20-foot half right away there,
Yep.
and a 30 foot beyond that.
Okay,
And this is a post frame building? Understand?
it's just gonna be a post,
Pole barn?
pole barn.
yeah. Matthews, construction people,
We're forgetting the
right,
microphone.
they're gonna build it for us. So it's, I guess it's a metal pole barn.
For the recording, it's according to the petitioner, it's a metal pole barn post frame that Matthews is building. That will be no more than 12 foot tall, from the previous comments, and I think we also missed the microphone.
Okay. I'll make a motion, we approve, subject to the findings of the staff report and the findings incorporated here within.
I'll second.
Okay.
And we'll do a roll call vote, please.
Scott Hessensberger,
Yes.
Andy Bailey,
Yes,
Stacy Pettigrew,
Yes.
Chester Bangles,
Yes.
Grant Muller.
Yes.
Alright, that's zero, so you'll be able to move into getting permitting and plans for permitting sorted out. You can reach out to Kat to start working on that.
I will be out of the office the
Yes.
next 3 days. I'll be back in Monday.
We both will, so you're,
Okay.
yeah.
I'm just gonna hold everything to it.
Okay.
That way I can get a hold of Steve, Matthews across the street, find out what he needs to
Yeah, have you work us up a plan so we can show you.
Perfect.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, do we have any old business? New business?
We do not have any other business, I don't believe.
I make
Other
a-
than, it's great to have, we've got a full
We got the
forum,
full
which is
board.
awesome, and I don't know, Scott, had you met, Grant yet?
I had not, but
Okay, so good.
I did
said
introduce
make sure
myself, yes.
introductions.
And Chester here, so,
So,
yeah.
and, so, which is great, and not just for this board, it's always, you have 5 or 7 people, and it seems like,
Yeah.
just life, you know, there's always somebody that has a sick kid, or, you know, farming, or whatever it is, and so, it's always cool, we get everybody.
Yeah.
and on a September meeting too.
I know, right? This is usually the one when, like, we have trouble with the farmers. I think, did we note at our last meeting that, we're not gonna be able to use this room,
Yeah, if we have any filings for October,
be at the airport?
it'll have to be at the airport because this room will be closed
For voting.
for early voting.
And then we're a little ways out yet, but put the bug in your ear. Most of you have been through this enough times to kind of know, Grant, you're new. But it just so happens, if you happen to have checked a calendar, that our scheduled BZA meeting hits right at Thanksgiving and right at Christmas within a few days. So at our October meeting, or if we don't have one, then we may have to have an email chain to figure out what we're doing with those. Typically, unless we can't get a quorum, if the November one is not over like Thanksgiving itself, we
Which
typically
don't have that-
hold it.
We don't have that problem now that we moved to Thursday too.
Right, exactly. So we typically hold November, but frequently, what we've done is cancel December, which is the week of Christmas, and a lot of people travel, or your kids are out of school. And instead, if we have a pile of filings, we call a special meeting in early January and hold 2 meetings in January, so that people don't sit for 2 months waiting on an answer. But you can certainly do whatever you want with those 2 meetings. I just wanna note that that decision's coming towards us, and we do wanna decide ahead of time so we can let the news know what to expect, and when people come to file, we can let them know what kind of timeline to expect.
So if we decide we wanna do it on Christmas Day, we can do it Christmas Day?
You may not have any staff reports, you may not, I mean, it may be a very peaceful meeting, or a really agitated one, you drag everyone out of their house Christmas morning.
I won't
But you
be
do
here,
have the
Scott.
right to call it Christmas Day.
No, I just like having the idea that if we wanted to, we could. All right, I make a motion, we adjourn.
When's our next meeting? October 25th. All right. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Uh,
Meeting adjourned.